Let's talk about changing your narrative. We hear this all the time. Just change your narrative, tell a new story. Well, it sounds easier than it actually is. And in this video, I'm going to talk about my own experience of how I changed it and also the kind of signals that I got that it was actually working. And then you can actually apply this to your own experience and start using it literally today. So welcome to this video where I talk about themes such as manifestation, business, prosperity, creating, doing it also in a way where you're actually operating from your natural self in energies of ease and of joy as much as possible. Of course, we're not in there all the time, but the more we can access those, the easier it is to actually be creating from a way that we are accessing our higher self and tapping into our higher vision and acting in it instead of what is often a very mind-led way that people set goals and force and push and manipulate circumstances to get what they want, which always has a cost. So this theme about changing your narrative and telling a new story, I remember I've asked this question to so many people over the years, really curious as to, what does this actually mean? Step by step, what does it actually mean? And why am I finding it so difficult to actually do it? Why am I defaulting to the old story so easily? And I didn't really find many answers until recently. And through my own practice of these and different sources that I began to research and access, I found a way to begin truly shifting it in a way that has felt quite natural most of the time. And other times I have to more intentionally put energy into it. And again, that's perfectly okay, because when we are learning something new, it's like operating a muscle that we really haven't used very much for a long time, right? It takes some effort, it takes some energy, and that will work initially until the point is actually like just running on its own. It's like you've installed a new program. So I'll give you an example of how what would happen. Actually, let me start with what would happen before I understood this and began to use it. So what would happen is when I was in a great mood, I was, in my visionary kind of experience and seeing all the possibilities, I'd be in a way so high that everything just felt actually really easy. Like, of course I can do whatever I'm attempting at the time. And then I would find maybe even within the day or a few days, I'd be talking to somebody, and then I'd be talking about the problems that I'm seeing, the problems I'm perceiving. And suddenly, like, the energy would drop dramatically, and it would be like going from this wonderful high place of vision down to this really narrow tunnel where I couldn't see, I couldn't even feel what I knew I felt just, a day or so before. And so even though I could tell like this was this shift kept happening from like the higher vision to lower energy, I still didn't. It was like I said, I didn't know how to do it, but quite frankly, I wasn't really activating my ability to do it at the time. It was like, oh, this default story keeps coming out of me as if it's somebody else, as if I don't actually have control. And I over the years I've looked at, why is that happening? Well, there is a strange comfort in repeating a story through the negative lens, because it creates a sense of false safety. It's like, this is what I see happening, and this is what I think it is, and I'm going to tell a story, so these two things are connected and they match, and therefore, of course, it's not me, because if I don't tell a story, I'm lying. I'm making something up, but this is the truth, isn't it? And I would feel that, and it honestly felt like I would be lying if I tried to change it. Or, some people, as they say, like pasting, a positive picture over a negative one. And it's not until I went deeper that I began to understand, again, what the shifts required include. So the drop of energy is your first signal that you're speaking about something in a way that you can actually change. And It doesn't mean we don't have negative emotions at times and we don't need to, experience and feel them. Yes, of course. But when we are then articulating it and speaking to somebody and retelling a story, or we are doing it in our own minds and we are repeating it to kind of say, hey, yes, I am right, I am accurate, and I want to instill this in my mind so that I don't forget the negative aspects of what just happened. So it is very much like a survival thing, a place, as I said, where we seek comfort because this is what I know, this is what I see, and if I just agree with it, then I don't have to be uncomfortable. I don't have to grow and change what I am saying or doing or feeling. And that will keep us stuck for a very long time until we are willing to actually see and feel and approach things quite differently. So what happened this week is, and I'd done this before, but this week it was interesting how it was kind of natural and how significant the energy shift was. So I have a weekly call that I go on to really raise my energy, to get input, to receive insight to what I'm going through, and also provide that. And so on this call, I made that decision before I even started the call, and I said I am going to activate my ability to tell a new story, to change my narrative. And so just having that intention allowed me to prepare for the call in that way. And then once I was on the call and I was about to share, I paused long enough to ensure that I was starting my sentence in the right frame. So instead of describing it, these things were fantastic this week, and then this stuff just was horrible, it was really stressful, I shifted it around and I said, I had this interesting experience this week where I had some really significant highs, and then I experienced some lows. And what I noticed was, and then I shared my learning as to what was going on and why was that low showing up when obviously the high was there as well, and why was it sometimes even happening within a day. For example, I was in, I do love the visionary space, right? It's just kind of a natural ability of mine, and it's where a lot of my brightest ideas show up. A lot of the kind of the answers to questions I have show up, and where I have found some very kind of shortcut solutions to things that before felt quite complex and difficult. So I know that space, I love that space. So how could I go from there to something really lower energy just because, something shifted that day, or somebody said something that triggered a memory of something and blah, blah, blah. It was just it wasn't even a huge physical, material problem or issue at all. It was just often more of thought and perception. And so as I began to notice this, I was able to now tell a story what I was noticing, instead of assuming that it was terribly negative, that there was a problem with that happening. So what? I just noticed it. Okay. And then as I told the story, I also emphasized the stuff that was actually really, you can call it successful, things that I had either realized, seen, or actually done over time that was wow, here I was thinking I wasn't in that position, but if I actually look at the evidence, it's showing me otherwise. It's showing me the level of change that I have gone through. And I began sharing this, and I noticed that my energy began to rise incredibly in those few minutes. And it was, when that happens, it's like a snowball effect. You say one wonderful thing, and then you see this other piece and this other piece. That's what started happening. And by the end of that call, I found that I was actually quite grounded and present, and just wow, I can't wait for my next step. And I can't wait for tonight. I can't wait for tomorrow morning. So it's like very much in the joy of the journey. And so that's an example of changing the story. Now, I had to be very vigilant in this because, as I said, there is this desire sometimes for safety, and sometimes we want, sympathy from somebody, or we want them to be like empathic towards us, or we want some attention, and we can use negative stories to receive that. And so knowing that that kind of thing can happen, I made a strong intention before the call. I even, wrote down a couple of words so that I would ensure that I would start in the right manner. Because when we start in the incorrect way, if I'd started, oh my God, it was such a terrible week. It was a half a good week and half a terrible week, and I don't know why I was so stressed. Or like if I went into that kind of description of it, that's what it would become. And then I would, pick up more examples of that, and that would snowball. So starting it effectively and framing exactly what I was going to say made all the difference. And then, as I said, the snowball effect happened in a positive way for me, because the message that I really wanted to express in my summary was that I realized when and how my mind would put a negative spin on things when so much was fabulous already, when so much is available and possible. And I know the power of changing my mind, changing and opening my heart to solutions and ideas. So I know that. And yet sometimes we know it up here, but we're not like acting with it. It's not coming all the way through. And so changing our narrative, telling a new story, is an extremely powerful way of starting to allow that energy to come through. Because soon as we speak it, we verbalize it, we put it into words. There is the sound of it, the resonance of it in our tone. Our body changes, energetically by expressing whatever it is we are expressing. It comes behind it, like, when we're enthusiastic, we really feel it, and then like the body's like acting that way, your hands are all over the place, where you're really connected and animated. That's the word, animated. And other times when you say something negative, it's almost like your whole body takes on that posture, and it's like, starts to like slump, and the frowns start and all of that, right? So, our body responds to what comes out of us. And so in this case, by using your voice, you can shift an experience or neutralize it even. And by telling it in a frame that is to your advantage, yes, this problem occurred. Yes, I did experience the stress, but I knew that was just a momentary experience. I knew it was just because this one thing happened. Maybe I didn't have lunch, right? It could be sometimes as simple as that. And then notice that I was reacting. And so once I shifted that and changed that and took responsibility for my state of being, then the energy began to rise again. And so with that, this telling of a new story, there is some preparation we can do. And some people, yes, they go into, the repetition and visualization and all of that. And I use that kind of thing sparingly once in a while. I don't use it a lot because I find I get into kind of a robot, a mechanical thing where I am not feeling, I'm actually not connecting. And then it's just using a lot of effort and energy in repetition. So instead, to take even a minute sometimes to shift the whole state by experiencing it, experiencing what you love, experiencing going into that bigger picture that I always talk about, looking at the whole context, right? Even if this particular instance right now is challenging, look at everything around it, right? There's probably lots of possibilities, opportunities that you will find once you actively start going in that direction. And so using our verbal power is one way to ensure that we move into that energy in a physical way as well as mental. And saying something out loud and saying it like with an energy, with a belief, it connects us to the higher realms as well. And we suddenly, like, we start imagining it, right? We start seeing it in our mind's eye, or we think of an idea or something that connects, and we're like, yeah, that does make sense, that works. And so doing this on a regular basis and stopping the conversations where you're doing it the typical way, where you're telling the negative narrative, where you're telling a narrative that does not support you, that maybe puts you down, that makes things look difficult, that makes things like you exacerbates them and makes them look worse. Like, all of that, we have to stop. We have to stop doing that on a regular basis so that we can then have this other thing that we are choosing to do. And that goes in terms of in-person conversations with other people. And it also goes with the conversations that happen in our own head, in our own mind, that circular loop of negative thinking that can happen. And so, catching yourself and going, wait, oh, I hear the story, and then realizing it's a story where you can kind of separate yourself from it instead of thinking that you are stuck in it, and or like it like that's a permanent thing or it's real. Those are just, think of it, they're just words being spoken, telling a certain, creating a certain energy. And do I like this energy? Because if I don't, I can stop that in the moment. Just stop. You don't even have to sit there and immediately replace it or anything. Just say, whoa, I saw that. And then stop. Breathe. Go do something positive. It could be a small action, like going off to do something at home or at work or take a walk. Just even 5 minutes can begin shifting that energy so that stopping happens. And then when you're a little more neutral, a little more relaxed, you can go, oh yeah, isn't it amazing how this happened for me this week? Isn't it wonderful how in the last 2 years I really, I changed that particular habit that I said I really wanted to change? Isn't it amazing that even 10 years ago, remember when I did blah blah blah? We can feed ourselves the stories that actually remind us of who we really are, and that we are much more. We are not the story itself. The story is just a story at the moment. And again, just of course, there are real life situations that happen that we have feelings about, that we have to tend to, that we may need time to speak out or speak about. And so this is not to negate that natural need, but is to say that we don't actually have to do that 100% of the time. If we reduce it to the moments where it might be relevant, and then do the work to keep moving forward and clearing ourselves of these assumptions. Because quite honestly, sometimes the most negative things, unfortunately, it feels like this, but they can end up being a blessing in the future. And we can't see or tell that until we travel the path. And so instead of hanging on to it and repeating it like a story, we are making that choice to change by pausing, by stopping, by telling a new story, by framing it in a way that, that still is believable to you. It's not like you have to make it some out of this world crazy story. Although, you know what, if you actually did, and you did it out of total, I'm going to use my imagination and totally reverse this whole thing, you might end up laughing at the whole thing. It may end up all sounding so ridiculous. And that laugh can then break you out of the spell that you had put yourself under with the story you were telling, right? So there's lots of different ways. And essentially, the thing is, we have the power to choose the narrative and to begin shape-shifting with it by using our voice, speaking it out loud, thinking it in our minds, and writing it out sometimes. So I also want to really emphasize here that the speaking it aloud can be extremely powerful, because when we hear it in our head, that's part of it, but speaking it, as I said, it has a physiological response. It has the sound resonance, it has a vibration. We tap into feeling, we tap into our heart, so we're really connected to more of ourselves, and that whole sensory experience amplifies things. So to be able to do this with people in your life that you can actually trust, that understand what this is, and won't stop and say, hey, wait a second, you're telling a whole lie, you're totally like walking all over the truth here, this is not accurate. And they'll stop you, they'll want you to repeat the old stuff because sometimes they're just more comfortable with it, or that's they're perceiving it from a different angle. So we have to be conscious not to have those kind of conversations as often with people who might be in that kind of space, and instead go, okay, who do I need to speak to? Is there somebody? And this is certainly where, when I work one-to-one on people find this really powerful, is sometimes just having a session or a couple of sessions, when I have those available, that they can really like practice that with me. And then I can show them, hey, did you notice you did this? Drop that piece, let it go, because you're still holding on to it, or, amplify this, tell me more, I want to hear the details, right? Because I have the ears and eyes to kind of receive the nuances of what is being communicated and transmitted, and then I can reflect it back. And then as you practice it again and again, people will leave a call like that just feeling on top of the mountain suddenly, and then the places that they were stuck suddenly begin to like loosen up, and they can actually move forward. And I do, I have to, of course, keep the person on track, because my job isn't to sit there and listen to a sob story, is to go, okay, there are ways to deal with that part when it needs to be dealt with. But when you are ready for the change and you're on that call with me for that purpose, this is where we are going. So you can be sure that you are going to understand how you can make those shifts more and more and more on your own, to the point where it will become more of your natural state. So I hope that's been beneficial, and would love to hear any comments after you've tried it out. Especially, as I said, you can start this right now, today, right? You don't have to wait 3 days. You can do it today. Instead of watching any other videos, just go practice this, write it down, say it out loud, call somebody that, if you do have somebody you can already trust in this regard, and reframe something and discuss it with them, and then change your story to one that will empower the rest of your day. So thank you again. Thank you for all the people who started subscribing. It's a new channel. Love to have more of you on board. And comments are always welcome. So have a fabulous day, and I look forward to hearing new stories from you.